Thank you for joining us this evening as we continue our series, DTR, or Define the Relationship. If you were here last time we gathered on January 6th, 2 weeks ago, then you remember, hopefully you remember, that Pastor Mark was here and he talked about friendship. He talked about our need for people. He said something along the lines of, you will not finish your spiritual journey if you walk it alone. So this series, it had to start with friendship because we all need relationships. But in a room of young adults, inevitably, we do have to talk about dating. So that is what we're gonna do this week, and we're gonna continue it the next time we meet in February, on the 3rd, I believe. I'm gonna start with a little video, so if you guys can roll that program for me, I'll get out of the way.
Écoute, putain, non, c'est la dernière fois, je te promets, and I swear, it's the last time I'm asking for money. I don't want to. Papa, you know I'm gonna take over the family business. Soon it's gonna be my money that I'm paying for you. Please do me the courtesy of sending me some more money.
All right. So, this is a question to the ladies in the room. By a show of hands, who would love to date that man? Tom dug on it. So Tom did not raise his hand. That was a joke, but I called you out for it. Don't do it again. I don't know if anyone would. This young man, I don't know the context of the video, but from what he said, it seems like he's a kid from a pretty affluent family whose dad hooked him up fat. Like he's at a pool and he's carrying a very oversized bottle of probably an alcoholic beverage. Now, I would not know personally, but some of you might. Anyways, he's carrying this drink around and he's very clearly angry at his dad. He's like, give me more money. Do me the courtesy of sending me more money. This kid, I've never met him, I don't know him, but as I saw this video, as I was scrolling the gram, I remember thinking, like, man, I don't know if this dude has prospects, but I hope he doesn't. He does, so maybe that's a hot take, but this young man, is he ready to date? I wouldn't say so. I don't know. Nothing in the video made me think he is. Maybe it was his worst possible moment. But there was nothing in the video that said this dude is mature enough to date. And I've had many, many conversations over the years with young adults, with teenagers about like what dating is, what do they need, and inevitably, almost to the person, the very first question that they ask is like, well, you know, what are you looking for? Who are you looking for? What are some things you want to see in the other person? And I think that's how we always frame the conversation. What does the other person need to have? And I think we ought to start with, when am I ready? That's the bigger question. That's the question the young man in the video didn't ask himself. And I think the root of that is that most of us think far too highly of ourselves. We far overestimate our own abilities, our own maturity, and it creates all manner of problems in our life. The passage that we're in today has a principle about viewing ourselves rightly that I think will be dramatically relevant for what dating is. So we're gonna walk through Galatians 6, 1-5, and then we're gonna take it and apply it specifically to dating relationships. What I want you to take away today is what you see behind me on the screen. Carry before you care. Carry before you care. We're gonna read Galatians 6, and then we'll just jump right in. So this is Galatians 6, 1-5. Brothers and sisters, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. For each will have to bear his own load. So the first point is we ought to care for one another's burdens. If we're reading Galatians 6, if you're not familiar with this book, it's in the New Testament. Paul wrote this letter to a bunch of churches in modern day Turkey. As Paul traveled the Mediterranean world, he would plant churches and he would teach them stuff about all aspects of life. And after he had traveled somewhere, he would post up somewhere in Corinth or Ephesus or Rome, and he would write letters to the churches he had previously visited and give them more teaching. Sometimes they would send him letters and ask, Paul, can you give us directions on these specific situations? And he would write back. So this letter is written to a whole bunch of churches to teach them certain things. There's this church in these areas were struggling with, they didn't really understand the gospel. Like, they didn't know that this story that God has made a way for broken people to be made whole. They didn't know what Christian life was actually like. They had all manner of confusion in their life. So Paul writes this letter, 6 chapters long, and the first few chapters are focused on what God has done for man, what God has done for humankind. And now here in chapter 6, Paul is saying, okay, God has done some stuff for you, so now we're going to respond. What does life look like for those who want to be Christians? And chapter 6 has this famous passage, or famous line in verse 2 that we bear one another's burdens. But before we get to that, we got to walk through line by line. There's some things we learn about people. And like I said before, this passage teaches us to view ourselves rightly. So if you read just verse 1, you see that the idea that he starts with before he gets to bear one another's burdens is that you need to restore in a spirit of gentleness those who are caught in transgression, those who are caught in sin. I like Julie mentioned before, I teach the marriage class here, and there's a guy that serves alongside me who oversees a group of people who act as marriage mentors. And I remember meeting with him this past winter, and I asked him, Rocky, why do you do this? Like, it's a lot of work, like a lot of admin stuff, a whole bunch of emails. You meet with people, then you train them, then you follow up. Like, it's a lot of commitment. And he was like, man, Fredy, I just want people to do well in marriage. Like, I really appreciate marriage. And I was like, hey, then you must have a good track record. And I assumed he would, because he's a marriage mentor. And he was actually, Fredy, this is my 4th marriage. And I was like, wait, what? So, like, what are you coaching people? And he's like, no, I did so many things wrong for so many years, and I blew up 3 different marriages. And then I met this Christian girl who said, if you want to date me, if you want to live together, if you want to build a life together, you got to be a Christian. So I became a Christian, and then that changed a whole bunch of things for me. What it did not change was that I'm still a sinner. I still do dumb things, and she does dumb things. The difference today compared to my 3 broken marriages is that I know that I'm part of the problem. For most of my life, I thought they were the problem. And Galatians 6 starts with this idea that all of us are part of the problem. All of us get caught in transgression, get caught in sin. And marriage is an opportunity where you see each other up close and personal, right? Blemishes and all. So this passage starts with talking about what people actually are. Every one of us is flawed. And this idea, if you look through the scriptures, you'll see it all over the place. And there are people who do systematic theology. So they take all the passages in the Bible and they say, what does it teach us about sin, about transgression? And there's an idea called a sinful nature, that people, you and me, all of us, have something inside of us that is irredeemably selfish. There's something in you that makes it so you always prefer yourself. And not always, like we all have friends, we all have family, we all do good things. But there's always this pull towards self, towards what's best for you, even if it hurts others. Jesus talked about this inward pull in Mark chapter 7. And this is what it says. So this is Jesus speaking to people who were wondering, like, what do we need to do to be good people? He says, or they were wondering about like what makes someone good or bad. And they were saying what makes you bad is like the stuff around you. And he's like, no. What comes out of a person is what defiles him. For from within, out of the heart, and biblically speaking, the heart is your inner self, the true you, your motivations, your desires, your affections. He says, out of your heart come evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, and foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. Obviously, we would look at that list, and some things are definitely worse than others. But as you read that list, there's not a single one of us could say, none of those apply to me. Every single one of us, if we look at that list, if we read it, surely something there applies to you. You have a tendency towards one of these things. If it's not one, it's another. If you're like, well, I'm not really like an evil thoughts guy. I'm not a murderer. Well, I'm like, do you like the stuff that other people have? Coveting is covered in this passage. You're like, well, I'm not a materialistic person, Fredy. I'm just present, man. I just care about people. Do you ever say dumb things? Foolishness is on the list. You're like, nope, I mostly don't talk because I don't want to look like that. I'm like, it sounds like you're kind of worried about your image. This passage also condemns pride. Inevitably, this passage reminds us that something in here, from the heart, from within, people are flawed. But the point of Galatians 6 is not that people are flawed. It teaches that people are flawed as the motivation for bearing with them. Because everyone is flawed, we must step into people's lives. We need to give second chances, right? That's the verb in this passage. That, when we restore gently, that restoration word, it means to put in order, to fix. That same word gets used in other parts of the Bible. For example, Mark 1:19, and it's talking about mending fishnets. So if a fishnet is torn and you mend it together, if something is broken and you fix it, that is what restoration is. So Paul starts this passage by telling us, people get caught in transgression, people get caught in sin. All of us are broken. So you need to gently restore. You need to go into people's lives and help them fix it. And you're like, wow, that sounds like a lot of work. Well, a big commitment. It's an active thing. It's an intentional thing. It requires some planning. It requires some pursuit. Right? We see this all the time, and then that's why we get to verse 2. We have the opportunity all the time, but I think we struggle to want to. So verse 2 gives us the command, bear one another's burdens. That's the main command in the first 3 verses of this passage. Bear one another's burdens. The word that gets used for burdens is used of heavy weights or stones. It's the heavy stuff of life, the bad things, like when someone loses a loved one, when they get dumped, when they fail a test, like the big things, the little things, just the weight on life, the bad decisions people make, the effects of the sin that Mark 7 describes. It doesn't matter what it is. See, people can take this word for burden, and they can take it one of 2 ways. We can talk about burden as suffering, the hard things in life, the painful things in life, or we can talk about the burden as the sinful things. Some of the bad things that have happened to me in my own life were the result of my own poor decisions. Some of the bad things that have happened to me in my life were just the result of life in a broken world. All of them collectively, we would just call burdens. And everyone needs help. Everyone is broken, everyone is flawed, and everyone experiences these burdens. And the command of this passage is that people need people. Step into someone else's life and help them carry that weight. I have seen this up close and personal in my own family. My dad passed away this last summer, July 26, 2022. And my mom had not been connected to a church for about 4 or 5 years. And so she wasn't really close to a lot of people. I live in Canada. My mom lives in Mexico. My brother lives in the US. So there's geographical and international borders between us. And my mom, as she's going through this loss of my dad, she really leaned on the one close friend she had. And unfortunately, this friend moved away about a month or 2 months before my dad passed away. So my mom talks to this lady 2 to 3 times a week, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours at a time. And this lady, Joan, why would she be willing to spend 10 hours a week on the phone with someone who lives multiple states away? I think because of what Galatians 6:2 says. Because she wants to bear the burdens of this person. The weight of my mother being a widow now cannot be carried alone, should not be carried alone. And this Christian woman, who is her friend, is taking the time and effort and energy to step into her life. All of us carry burdens, and all of us need people to help us with those burdens. Sin is a burden. Suffering is a burden. In the end, it doesn't matter what the cause of the burden is. Our experience is the weight. We carry the weight of the burden, and we need people. We all need people. And Paul's command for bearing with one another is that we bear with one another and restore people with a spirit of gentleness. If you wanted to put it in a phrase, we could just say, Christians give second chances. That's what Paul is trying to get us to understand. All right, I have 2 children. If you don't know me, you might not know that because they're not here. They're home sleeping. But my 2 little boys, when the first one was born, my wife and I sat down and we wrote a list of family values, which is a nerd thing to do, but I'm a nerd, so I was happy to do it. When the second one was born, Rebecca was like, Fredy, I'm not sure that your list is like up to date. There's some key things you're missing. And I was like, that's a hot take. I thought it was perfect. But I listened to my wife's godly wisdom, and we went on a little trip this last summer to Thetis Island, and we just had a weekend away. The kids stayed, or before number 2 was born, we went away on this trip. And we gave the family values a reboot. And there were some that we cut because they were wordy, unnecessarily wordy. And there were some that we added, but one that I was adamant, I'm like, no, we have to keep this one, is we give second chances. Like when I look at my boys, and as they're tiny right now, they're 2 and 3 months. As they get bigger, what I want them to hear all the time is we give second chances. When the big one slaps the little one on the face because he's rude, and kids do that, I'm gonna look at him and say, you need to apologize to your brother. And then I'm gonna look at the little one and say, we give second chances. And as they get bigger and the slaps become harder, or they become much more painful, or the slap actually comes from life, as they experience disappointment and pain, the phrase that I will use with my sons is, we give second chances. That's not Fredy's value. Fredy's just parroting it. That's Galatians 6:1 and 2. That's God's value. God wants us to be people who give second chances. This passage reminds us that people are broken, that people carry weight, and we ought to step into their life and carry it with them. Part of the motivation for this is obedience to the Lord. Like the Bible actually commands it. But part of the motivation also comes in verse 3. We need to see ourselves rightly. You might not think, or don't think you're something when you're nothing. And if you just read that verse, it's kind of painful. Where you're like, is God telling me that I'm nothing? That's very rude. I can't believe that's in the Bible. But in the context of the passage, it's not saying you're nothing. It's saying you're nothing in comparison to the burdens that every person carries. All of us, when we see the pain of others, our first thought is self. I don't know if I can step up. I don't know if I want to step up. I don't even like that person. Why would I help them? And this passage reminds you, like, don't think you are something when you are nothing. This person that you see in pain, that you see burdened, whether through their own sin or through suffering in life, they need someone to bear with them. You could be that someone. So this passage reminds us, see yourselves rightly. It's not trying to diss you, it's not trying to roast you, it's just reminding you, everyone needs help. If we give them that help, the thing about relationship is it's always reciprocal. If we are the kind of people who bear the burdens of others, then we will be the kind of community who bears the burdens of others. It's not just a one-person thing, it's an everybody thing. Right? I love M&Ms. Everyone should love M&Ms. I don't know, that shouldn't be a shock. That's a pretty standard taste, I think. But I'll say everyone loves M&Ms. Everyone loves M&Ms. And one of my favorite things to do is buy the sharing size bag of M&Ms. The sharing size is kind of a suggestion because you don't actually have to, but I enjoy sharing them because good things ought to be shared. Second chances are much sweeter than M&Ms. Second chances ought to be shared. And sometimes we act like it's a bag that's an individual size one. There's no way I'm going to share my second chances. They have to earn them. But if it is earned, it is not a second chance. This passage reminds us that Christians give second chances. And frankly, if you are a Christian, the beginning of Christian life is that you received a second chance. Right? The gospel story is that you had done nothing to impress God. The passage reminds us everyone is broken. Everyone transgresses, right? Everyone sins against God. God's law says this, and we do this. And that's our world. But the Christian life begins with God saying, I'm going to forgive you. I'm going to do something for you that you cannot do for yourself. I'm going to offer you forgiveness of your sins and eternal life. All you have to do is accept it. So the Christian life begins with God giving us a second chance. And really, if we were doing the math, it's far more than a second chance. It's like the second billionth chance. So Christian life, which is giving other people second chances, is not God calling us to do something that we are unfamiliar with. God is simply asking us to share what we have received. We received a second chance from God. We give a second chance to others. This passage very clearly teaches care for one another's burdens. But there's two more verses. So verses 4 and 5, we'll read the whole thing again, but then verses 4 and 5 teach us carry your own load. So I'll read the whole thing. Brothers and sisters, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual, you who are Christians, restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, give second chances, and so fulfill the law of Christ. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. For each will have to bear his own load. The very first verb there, test your own work. And the verb that gets used here is used in the context of purifying gold, right? And to purify gold, you heat it really, really hot. The junk goes away, or the junk rises, gets thrown away, and you're left with the pure stuff, the good stuff, the valuable stuff. So this passage is saying, well, no, test your work. You're saying, or I'm commanding you, bear one another's burdens. Give people second chances. So test your work. What is your life like? When someone looks at you, would they say that, man, Fredy gives second chances? They should. But do they? You test it. How can you possibly test that? Well, you just look at people's lives. I had a very real experience of this in sports. So I like playing sports. I run a co-ed soccer team, and I am always recruiting people. So if any of you play soccer, holla at your boy. I'm always taking players. If you're interested. You don't have to, though. I remember recruiting last year, and I took a few players who might have oversold their ability. We'll just say it rightly. I don't know why you're laughing, Preston. I'm not talking about you. Maybe I am. I don't know. Doesn't matter. It was Kayla. Oh, Kayla, you... Okay. Anyways. Some of them might be in this room. But to finish the story, I took a few players who were good people, but may have oversold their ability. In a few games, we got lit up. Like, I don't mean like we lost by like 2 or 3 or 4. I'm talking lost by double digits. And if you're familiar with soccer, every goal is worth 1. So if you lose by double digits, that's a beatdown, right? Like that's rough. So I had a couple people come up to me like, hey, like, is that dude still on the team? Like, next game? Or are you gonna cut him? And my first thought was, I actually deleted their number. Like, they're done. They're off my team. They're out of my life. I'm gonna delete they're off of Facebook, right? People my age, if I delete you off Facebook, we're done. Like, we're not friends. But then I was like, man, I should be a Christian. God, you gave me a second chance. I'm gonna give him a second chance. And I was like, yeah, no, we're gonna keep him. I'm not gonna lie to you. I wavered. But in the end, I had to do the right thing. And the right thing is that Christians give second chances. You got to test your work. If I can't give someone a second chance when they give up 10 goals, dude, good luck giving someone a second chance when they lie to you. Well, 12. Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, she right. Yeah. Next year, we'll talk about marriage, and this will be an illustration for gassing your hubby up in public. But anyways, for the purposes of this illustration, my point is when you see people's actions, that shows you what they actually believe. This passage tells us, test your work. Anyone can say, I give second chances, but do you actually give second chances? It becomes quite evident when we study it. We test your work, and then it transitions to boasting, right? Because then if you test your work, you can boast in yourself. And again, this is another part of this little passage that if you're flying through it, you'll be like, wait a minute, I thought Christians were like against boasting. Like, isn't that a sin? Doesn't the Bible say don't boast? And yes, that is true. The Bible says do not boast. But there's different ways that you can use this word. So there is a bad kind of boasting. There is a boasting that is in fact a sin. It is the kind of boasting that says like, look at me, I'm so great. Everyone pay attention to me. Look at all my good things. Ignore my flaws. Look at all my good things. There's this kind of boasting that is a sin. We see it in the inverse in 1 Corinthians 13:4, which talks about love. So the opposite of love is hate, which is a sin. So love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast, is not arrogant or rude. So there is a kind of boasting. There is a kind of selfishness, of self-promotion that is bad. And yet, this word is also used in a positive sense. There is a kind of self-promotion that is good in a sense. And it's not promotion of self as much as it is emphasizing God's work in your life. Like the things God has done in you and through you. So we read 1 Corinthians 1:31, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. So why would this passage command us to boast in a particular way if boasting is bad? It's not the boasting. It's not the making much of someone that's the problem. The problem comes with who the person is we're boasting about. If we talk about what God has done in our lives, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. If we talk about how amazing we are, love does not envy or boast. There is a good kind and a bad kind of boasting in the scriptures. Here in Galatians 6:4, I think boasting is the good kind. It's talking about what God has done in you and through you. It's taking responsibility. If you are testing yourself and you see that I have in fact worked to restore people with gentleness, I have in fact stepped up to bear the burdens of one another, well, I ought to boast in the Lord. Look what God is doing in my life. There is a good kind of boasting. Paul's argument here is that the people who carry their own load of helping others, those people, they're well equipped to do this over and over and over again. But the passage ends with verse 5, and verse 5 says something, its own standalone command. Carry your load. Bear your own load. And this load is a different word than burden. Burden, I said, was like a rock or a weight, like something heavy, heavy, heavy. This one is, the word, it means cargo. And we see it elsewhere in the Bible, in Acts 27:10. It's talking about the stuff on a boat. And if you've ever seen a boat, boats are designed to carry things. So cargo, your load, it is a manageable weight. Burdens are not. Burdens are not designed to be carried. They're heavy, hard things in life. So what Paul's saying here is, well, each one of us should carry the stuff we're designed to carry and help others who are carrying stuff they're not designed to carry. And when we look at our lives, I think there are things that are pretty obvious that we're designed to carry. All of us are relational people. We are designed to have friends. We ought to carry friendships. All of us are born into family units. You might not have a great family unit, but you were born into one. We are designed to be part of families. We have relationships. We have responsibilities in our work, in our school, in our hobbies. These are things that you were meant to do. You were created to do. This is the cargo on your boat. And Paul's command is, no, you need to carry your weight, carry your cargo. And if you can carry your cargo, you have the skills you need to bear one another's burdens, to help someone with the burdens, the weights, the load, or the weight of life. So we see how these two things interact. That we are each to carry our own load, but we are to also bear one another's burden. So if we're going to combine these things, we get to this principle that I'm going to apply to dating, which is carry before you care. So when you think of what relationships are, there's two necessary parallel commands. You carry your own weight. There are things that you must take responsibility for, and you bear one another's burdens. And if we're asking the question, when am I ready? When am I ready to date? We would say, well, if you can carry your own burden, or if you can carry your own cargo, you're ready to bear one another's burdens. So, we see this. And then the question is, like, what are the concrete expressions of that? Like, how do I know? How do I know that I'm ready, Fredy? So fine, I will carry before I care. So I have a little graphic for you, which will come up. Bam. Okay, so this is very aptly named the Dating Readiness Triangle. So you can laugh at it all you want, but it's super practical. It will change your life. So when we say carry before you care, there are three things that you need to know about yourself before you are ready to be in a dating relationship. A dating relationship is an opportunity that you will have to bear with another person. As you step into their life, you're gonna carry weights that are not your own as they go through hard things, and you help them. If you don't help them, you won't be dating very long. So you step in and you help them. So there is stuff about yourself that needs to be figured out. That's what's behind me. These values, these character, this habit. So I'm going to go over each one and describe what I mean. And then this will be available for you to download and fill out. This is meant, it's not homework. I know you all hate homework. It's not homework. It is a practical exercise that will help you know who you are, that will help you take responsibility for your own life. You need to carry your own load. Galatians 6:5. And if you can carry your own load, you will be ready to bear one another's burdens. Galatians 6:2. So we're going to start with values. What sort of things do I mean by values? Well, there are things that, or values are beliefs that drive your behavior. They are things that impact the way that you act, the way that you talk, the things that you do. So I'll give you an example from my own life. Family is a huge value for me. I don't know when the first time I had the thought was, but I basically my entire life, I was like, I would like to be a dad. I think that's something that I want. And I grew up in a home where my mom and my dad were still together. It wasn't always great, but they were like, we would rather die than be divorced. And maybe they plotted murder because there was a couple times that things weren't great. But they were like, no, we're going to stay together. No matter what, we're going to stay together. And we're going to have kids. And they raised my brother and I. And my dad was like, that's just what you do. If you're a man, you marry a woman, and you have kids. So I grew up thinking, I would like to have kids. And as I became a teenager and a young adult, I realized that not everyone wants that. I don't know if you knew that, but not everyone wants kids. Some people want to work, some people want to travel, people want different things. But for me, that's a key value. I didn't know this when I started dating, and there was a few relationships that didn't work out because we wanted totally different things in life. This was one of the things. And now I'm married, my wife Rebecca. We've been married 8 years. That's like forever. Yeah, come on, still going strong, baby. Come on. And one of the values in our relationship that we agreed upon, which helped us merge our lives, was that we both value family. We both wanted babies. My wife went to school for 5 years to become a nurse. And then got pregnant, and was like, I guess I'm going on mat leave now. And she had to be willing to do that because someone has to stay home and take care of the kid. This value really matters. You have to know what it is that you want in life, or you will have no ability to communicate and build a relationship with another person because you have no way of knowing what you want. And relationships are killed when people join together and then suddenly want totally different things, and they're pulled apart. You need to know what you value in life. Family was a big one. What do you want in terms of career? What role does your faith play in your life? You need to decide, am I going to be a Christian? Do I even care what the faith is? Okay, I'm going to be a Christian. What does it mean to be a Christian? Because people mean totally different things. You need to know what your values are as part of carrying your own load. Secondly, character. What are the non-negotiables for you? Like, obviously everyone's gonna say, well, like, they need to be like not a liar and not a cheater and not a stealer. Stealer that's a bad conjugation of that verb. Thief, yeah, okay. Stealer, they're not on the Pittsburgh Steelers, I guess. My point is, there are things that all of us would say, directed at the other. But the question we started with is not, what am I looking for, but am I ready? So what character pieces do I need to be ready to date? I don't think any of us ever ask ourselves. And if you started with asking yourself, I think most of us would get exposed. You see, when I started dating, I really value, or I still value sports, but I would value it more than the relationship early in the game. And there was a girl I dated for a couple years that things did not work out with because I valued basketball more than I valued the relationship. And the expression of that in my life, or the reason that happened all the time, was because I have no problem like changing the plan. Like in my mind, that wasn't a lie because when I said that initially, I meant it, but then I changed my mind. So then when I said it the second time, I also meant the second thing, which was not the first thing. So I was like, we will totally go out on Friday. And then I was like, actually the boys texted, I'm hooping with the dogs, I'm no longer available. And to my surprise, the girl was not impressed. Yeah, and we broke up. Imagine that. Imagine that. My point is, when we talk about character, that's the person that you are. Do you keep your word? Everyone says they're honest. Like, I would never lie. I'm like, yeah, but like, do you show up when you say you will? Do you follow through on the things you say you're gonna follow through? When people give you feedback, do you receive that feedback and actually change? What kind of person are you? And if you can't answer those questions, I'm like, I don't think you're carrying your load. If you're not carrying your load, how are you gonna carry someone else's burdens? Lastly, habits. So these are the things that you do with your time, with your money, with your energy. What rhythms or rituals are important to you, right? Whether it's your job or your hobbies or your key relationships, all of us have things that really, really matter. In my own life, I already mentioned soccer. Like, I love to play team sports. I can't skate and I can't swing. So like, I'm trash at baseball, I'm trash at tennis, I'm trash at racquetball. I've golfed one time and got kicked off the course. So I'm like, those things are not for me. But I'm like, soccer, football, basketball, I'm there. Those things, those are super fun. So if you ask me, what habits really matter to you? Well, I'm like, well, I do those things. My son is 2, and he plays soccer with his dad. He doesn't even know what soccer is, but he knows that if it's somewhat round, we kick it in this house. So that is a habit that I have passed on to my kid. There are things that all of us do that we would not want to stop simply because we're in a relationship. What are those things? If you don't know what those things are, you're gonna be really upset when you get in a relationship and the other person's like, I don't like you doing that. Don't do that anymore. And you're like, well, it's not like, soccer's not like something I do. Like, it's my decompressor. So Rebecca, 8 years in, knows that I just play soccer. That's how Fredy unwinds. So she's willing to support me going out, even if that means she's stuck with 2 babies and they're both freaking out. Like, and that's part of what makes our relationship strong. We support each other in the habits that we have. The character that we have, we're not perfect people, but we are committed to each other. and we have similar values. Values, character, habits, all of these things, I would say collectively, are your load. You need to know what they are for you, and they are unique to each and every one of you. If you cannot answer these questions, you will get into a relationship, and the other person will answer them for you. And either you will be in a crappy relationship, or you will break up. If you know what they are, that will help you choose who you date. If you know what your load is, you will be able to be honest, be open, be healthy in a relationship. When we talk about dating readiness, this is what I mean. You need to know who you are. You need to carry before you care. I recognize that there's a lot more to say about dating. So this is the preamble. This is dating readiness. The next time we gather, we're going to talk about dating responsibly. So there's a lot more Bible to cover and a lot more things to say, but for the purposes of today, my hope is that you see that there is a tremendous amount of self-reflection that has to take place before you're ready to jump into something with someone. Dating is an opportunity to bear the burdens of another person, and you will not be able to do that if you have not carried your own load. So, returning to the video we started with, as funny as it was also kind of sad because this kid, he's not carrying his own load. The dude in the video, he doesn't have a job. He's calling his dad for money. He's disappointed his dad would say no. He can't take no for an answer. Does that kid know what his values are? Does that kid have the character? Does that kid have habits and rituals that make him who he is? We'd probably say no to all of them, which means he's not ready to date. I do not want any of you here to be like that guy. I want you to know who you are and be ready for a relationship. That doesn't mean you have to get into one tonight, so don't mishear me. But I want you to know who you are, doggone it. So, carry your own load before you care for another person. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to invite the worship team up to close in a few songs. Father God, thank you for today. Thank you for your word in Galatians 6 that gives us two clear commands, Father, that we ought to carry our own load and bear the burdens of one another. So Father, I pray for every person here. I pray that they take something away from today that helps them in their relationships. Whether it's someone they're already dating or someone they're interested in, or they're not even there yet and they're just trying to figure out what they want in life. Father, I pray for wisdom and clarity for every person here. We want to see healthy relationships, not just for our own sake, but to give you glory. So Father, I pray that happens at Northview Young Adults. We want to be people who carry our own load and bear the burdens of one another. So help us do this. We ask these things in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.